Welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. We start with the development of actions of the United States regarding the Central American migrant caravan. In the last hours, the U.S. Army has been carrying out practice closures of the border in Tijuana. This video of the exercise done, it comes just hours after the U.S. President Donald Trump said he had authorized the use of lethal force by troops guarding the border against the migrant caravans. U.S. President said he has authorized the use of lethal forces by troops guarding the border against the migrant caravans. Speaking from Florida on Thanksgiving Day, Trump said he hoped such force will not be necessary. Earlier, a White House memorandum published in Newsweek said there is evidence that the migrants may prompt incidents of violence and disorder.
If they have to, they're going to use lethal force. I've given the okay. Yeah, if they have to, I hope they don't have to. But, you know, you're dealing with a minimum of 500 serious criminals. So I'm not going to let the military be taken advantage of. I have no choice. Do I want that to happen? Absolutely not. But you're dealing with rough people.
Trump threatened that he would be prepared to see a government shutdown if Congress doesn't approve his request to fund border security, including a wall.
Could happen, yeah, over border security. The wall is just a part of border security, a very important part, probably the most important part. But could there be a shutdown? There certainly could, and it will be about border security, of which the wall is a part.
However, the U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis already shut down media reports on military personnel on the Mexican border being ready to use force. He said the Department of Homeland Security never made this request. The Defense Secretary also said that military police can only temporarily detain people at the border if necessary.
American President Donald Trump.
Migrants staying at the shelter in Tijuana, Mexico, have reacted to the latest comments made by the U.S. president.
We don't think of it as a threat. We take it more as a joke or something like that, because it is not Trump or anyone else who rules. God is the only one. If God wants it, we will cross. And if God doesn't want it, then we will not.
We got together and we will do what it takes to put pressure and cross. We can't stop it. Because if he tries to mess with one of us, he'll mess with the whole of Honduras, the whole of El Salvador, the whole of Guatemala, and the whole world is watching.
Now we move to Chile, where the Interior Minister Andrés Chadwick will be called to Congress to answer questions about Catrillanca's murder. With 61 votes in favor and 65 against, lawmakers approved a resolution which would allow questions to be posed to the minister. This is to take place during a lower house session on December 11th. The opposition said it hopes this will serve to publicly clarify the police role in the murder of the Mapuche leader, while protests take place at the government palace. Our correspondent in Santiago, Tiare Valenzuela, brings us more details about this case. Welcome.
On Wednesday, the National Police Chief went to Congress to answer questions made by human rights and Mapuche community commissions in regard to the timeline of events that led to the murder of Mapuche activist Camilo Catrillanca. This case has outraged political movements and the Chilean people. The Mapuche have held several demonstrations with the support of Chilean citizens. Many people have marched in different parts of Santiago and throughout the country, in particular where Mapuche communities are located. Tomorrow, there will be more demonstrations in Santiago to demand justice and to reject the ongoing state violence against the Mapuche people.
A study by a non-profit organization has revealed that over 5 million Chileans live below the poverty line. These figures go against official government statistics that some argue try to hide the country's socioeconomic issues.
The Sol Foundation has challenged the government's claim of how many people live in poverty. According to its research, there are actually 4 million more than the official numbers say. In fact, over half of Chile's population earns less than $500 a month, in a country that has one of the highest costs of living in the region.
Nobody in Chile can manage to live on a minimum wage. Today, no one can live with a monthly average of 200,000 pesos.
The cost of living here is through the roof. Inflation is supposedly under control, but in reality, that's not true.
The Sol Foundation has laid bare the disparity between reality on the ground and what the government thinks to be the case.
The conclusion we have come to is that, taking into account salaries and the pension system, nearly 30% of the population lives under the poverty line, not just 8.6% as the government reports. That's an increase from a supposed 1.6 million people to over 5 million.
Among those millions, the most affected are senior citizens and the Mapuche people.
As a Mapuche, we are being used for a government program that has its whole charade written out. They say there is no discrimination, no violence, no stolen lands.
A government that is clearly out of touch can be the only way to describe how a country with the biggest GDP in Latin America has such high levels of inequality.
Also in Chile, the Senate has rejected the bill for the 2019 budget. Now, the bill has to be checked again by a joint commission to introduce changes. The main criticism has come on the funds projected for the security forces. Members of the Senate have questioned over the operation that is currently taking place in the Araucanía region, where a Mapuche leader was killed last week. The public sector in Chile has called for a national strike on Monday 26. This after failing to reach an agreement with Sebastián Piñera's government on the wage adjustment. Workers believe the offer made by the government of a 3.1% increase is not enough and are demanding a 7% increase. We move now to Argentina, where on Wednesday night police shot and killed a member of the Confederation of Workers of the Popular Economy, or CTCEP. His name was Roland Orellana. He was killed outside Buenos Aires during a police operation to evict a group of people who wanted to take over land to build houses. Witnesses said Orellana was shot in the mouth and the back. Others were injured by rubber bullets and 4 people were arrested. Students and teachers have faced off against the police in the Argentine capital, as the Buenos Aires city legislature voted in favor of a controversial new university project. A strong police presence blocked the demonstrators from reaching the parliament building. Then they used tear gas to break up the protest. 29 higher education colleges will close to make way for the Unicaba, leaving many teachers without a job. In Argentina, the Forum on Critical Thinking entered on its 4th day. This event is taking place just a week before the G20 meeting begins in that country. The theme of the event is fighting for equality, social justice, and democracy. During the 4-day meeting, leaders discussed social issues affecting the Latin American and Caribbean region. Telesur has been speaking exclusively with the various participants at the forum who have taken the stage. Among the topics discussed on Thursday were the ongoing attempts by the United States to assert dominance on Latin America, the rise of feminist movements, and the attacks of the right wing to those groups.
The United States wants to recover what they call their own backyard. This will create many risks for Latin American countries. The policy of the U.S. is to divide and conquer. But the policy of Latin American countries should be to cooperate with other Latin American countries and not to be dependent on the U.S. A similar idea to what the UNASUR and CELAC represent.
Argentina's economist and politician Cecilia Nahum has criticized President Mauricio Macri's administration and how he uses the G20 group for his purposes. Nahum also says that one of the main goals of the U.S. President Donald Trump is to prevent Latin American integration.
I think what Trump is basically doing is deepening and radicalizing the worst betrayals of the United States against Latin America. What he's doing is deepening a linkage and highly militaristic look where the focus is put in cooperation in security, where there is no kind of recognition, respect for the rights of Latin American people, and specifically for the rights of migrants.
Time for a pause here at From the South. You can find us on Twitter at Telesur English and my personal account, Laura P. Telesur. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Venezuela, the electoral campaign for municipal elections have kicked off. Different candidates opened their campaign at the capital, Caracas. 400 prosecutors will supervise the elections. 50 national, regional, and indigenous political organizations are racing for the December 9th elections. The International Tourism Fair of Venezuela have started to show the potential of this country. This event will take place until next Sunday and is aimed at attracting tourists and investors. 224 tourist companies will participate in the fair that will also bring different cultural activities. In Colombia, human rights organizations are calling Iván Duque's government to fulfill the peace agreement signed in 2016. Around 400 social leaders gathered at the 10th National Human Rights Forum discussed ways to find a solution to what they called a social conflict. They have warned on the potential dismantle of the system for reparations and justice. They also criticized the persecution against former FARC members. In Brazil, Landless Workers Movement, or MST, has submitted dozens of documents for a public hearing at the Legislative Assembly of the state of Minas Gerais. This is in attempt to stop the Brazilian government for evicting 450 families from a settlement called Quilombo Campo Grande. In March of this year, the settlement residents received eviction notices. Dozens of chefs in Bolivia have made the world's largest charquecán, a local delicacy which main ingredient is llama meat. The event took place in the city of Oruro and it's aimed at promoting the consumption of this kind of meat, which is already common in indigenous communities. They say it has plenty of benefits and is a key factor in longevity. More than 500 kilos of llama meat were mixed with eggs, corn, and potatoes, a dish that even got the approval of President Evo Morales. Social organizations in Bolivia are throwing their support behind President Evo Morales and Vice President Álvaro García Linera as they seek to be re-elected in 2019's general elections.
Bolivian Workers' Union announced its decision following a national assembly.
We want to strengthen the candidacy of Evo Morales. He's the best candidate and leader for the 2019 general elections. We're also throwing our support behind our friend Álvaro García Linera, the vice presidential candidate seeking re-election.
Social organization, campesinos, and indigenous groups, all part of the National Council for Change, wasted little time in demonstrating their support for Morales and his vice president. They're standing in solidarity with the union as they back the government.
We, the campesino movement, have opted to have a political wing so we can't be joined to another political party. That is why the Bolivian Workers' Union also has taken that decision.
García Linera had initially announced that he would not be seeking re-election, but it was President Evo Morales who requested that social organizations ensure that the vice president's decision is reviewed.
It's the decision of the Bolivian Workers' Union. The most important organization of the working class has reached this decision.
Meanwhile, President Morales called on social movements to discuss and come up with ideas that would help to secure the country's political future.
This is going to be historic. I don't believe there's any other country in the world where the worker sector has come together to organize, discuss, evaluate, and come together to participate in democratic elections.
These organizations are a kind of extended social cabinet for the government. General elections will be held at the end of next year, but right now the country is immersed in an early electoral campaign.
The first group of Cuban doctors from the More Doctor programs in Brazil are expected to arrive to the island on Friday. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel took to Twitter to welcome the doctors. He said, "We honored the men and women that made history in Brazil. Welcome home." Cuba decided to pull out of the program last week after receiving insults by Brazil's president-elect Jair Bolsonaro. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has met with Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel in Havana. Sánchez and Díaz-Canel have agreed to maintain permanent political contact with annual meetings. Both leaders have expressed their wish to normalize the relations between the two countries. This is the first visit by a Spanish Prime Minister to the island in 32 years. Various social organizations in El Salvador have taken to the streets to demonstrate against water privatization. Their main goal is to demand that the National Assembly declares access to water as a human right. The demonstrators also visited the headquarters of various political parties, including Arena and Demócrata Cristiano, to demand laws that favor the environment. According to the UN, El Salvador has the highest level of environmental deterioration in the American continent after Haiti. At least 6 people have been killed in Haiti when a government vehicle lost control and ran over a group of protesters. The vehicle was later set on fire by other protesters. This incident occurred on the 4th consecutive day of general strike. Demonstrators wanted President Jovenel Moïse to resign from not investigating corruption allegations. The Haitian president urged his political rivals to respect democracy after 4 days of violence and protests calling for his resignation. In a televised address, Jovenel Moïse appealed for a calm and demanded that the will of the people who elected him as president in 2017 be respected. He also called for an all-inclusive dialogue. The statement comes after Sunday's demonstrations follow a general strike that has paralyzed the country. Now let's take a second break. Stay with us, connecting the Global South. Welcome back. A road that connects North and South Korea have been inaugurated. The road will be opening again after 14 years as part of the agreements reached by Pyongyang and Seoul during the third Inter-Korean Summit. It will be used to transport personnel and equipment for excavations in the Korean demilitarized zone. The road will be working by the end of the year. At least 5 children have been killed and 18 others injured after being hit by a car in China. According to local media, the accident took place in front of a primary school. After the hit, the driver tried to flee, but he has been arrested. War crimes suspect Alfred Yekatom has been arrested outside the Central African Parliament in Bangui. Yekatom will face the International Criminal Court this Friday, accused of murder, deportation and torture of Muslims as the leader of the anti-Balaka armed movement. Officers were seen drawing him out of the National Assembly after he used his gun inside Parliament. The National Union of Mental Workers of South Africa recently launched a new political party, the Socialist Worker Revolutionary Party. Earlier, we spoke with the NUMSA, the spokesperson, about this new party.
Well, one of the key lessons that we've learned as NUMSA, as having worked as part of the ANC alliance, is that it is impossible for the working class to achieve genuine equality and freedom when they make compromises with capital. And our alliance within the ANC was in effect a compromise with capital, because the ANC has been pursuing very, very narrow neoliberal macroeconomic policies.
In Zimbabwe's finance minister has presented the country's 2019 budget during a session of parliament, but this was overshadowed by what was happening in the stands. Police forcibly ejected opposition lawmakers for refusing to stand up when President Emerson Mnangagwa walked in. The 2019 budget preservation comes amid deepening economic woes, characterized by a shortage of basic commodities and hard currency. The Islamic University of Gaza is offering vocational training courses to young Palestinians with disabilities, sustained during the Great March of Return protests. Participants trained for 4 months in different specialties, including carpentry, programming, maintenance of smart technologies, among others. The program aims to help them find employment despite their disabilities so they can contribute to society.
The project targets those injured during the March of Return demonstrations. The project started at the beginning of August 2018. It targeted the injured that have become handicapped.
They told us that there were professional courses for the wounded, and I wanted to participate in them. And thank God, I chose the specialization of the maintenance of mobiles. I loved this field before, and I could learn it after my injury. Thank God.
The Anne Frank House Museum has reopened in the Netherlands after being renovated. It's been updated to receive a new generation of visitors whose grandparents were born after World War II. 1.2 million people visit the museum each year, which is a tiny apartment where Anne wrote her famous diary. Her and her family's story is told through photos, quotes from her diary, audio tour, and video testimonies of the Holocaust survivors. The Berlin Zoo presented 4 new tiger cubs. The babies are Sumatran tigers, the smallest tiger species critically endangered. Only 350 to 450 of these animals live in the wild. The 2 females and the 2 males were born last August. Like this, we've come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurenglish.net, where you can find more stories, more opinion articles, and special interviews. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. I'm Laura Prada. Continue watching Telesur, connecting the Global South.